When you consider all the different parts of the Hindu Dharma traditions, there's a holiday, festival, or commemoration of some sort for nearly every day of the year. Not each of these is celebrated by every part of the community, or at least with the same fervor. Others are near universally celebrated. Adding color to the picture is the fact that, other than those commemorations tied to birthdays of historical figures, the date each is celebrated, based on the Western calendar, varies from year to year. Of course, based on the Hindu/traditional Indian calendar, the date remains the same. But since this calendar is a combo lunar/solar calendar, it doesn't fully align with the Western calendar. Adding even more color to the picture, intensified now that the Hindu diaspora is global, is that the exact timing of festivals, particularly important for temples, often depends on astronomical positions, which means that the calendar date of the festival may be one day earlier or later depending on where you are in the world. Sorting this all out is what we're talking about today, the most prominent Hindu holidays, festivals, and other dharmic days. I'm Matt McDermott, and this is All About Hinduism. Before we talk about individual festivals, let's talk about the Hindu/traditional Indian calendar. The Hindu calendar is a combination lunar-solar calendar, with 12 lunar months each year, overlapping with solar months, throughout the descriptions of the holidays, since this podcast is primarily aimed at those people wanting to learn about Hinduism, and most of our listeners ordinarily follow the Western calendar, as does India for all secular events. I'll mention months from both calendars, but on the numbered day for the Western calendar, as well as when the holiday will be celebrated in 2025, the year when this episode is released. And now, the holidays and festivals themselves. Makar Sankranti. Makara Sankranti, if we don't follow the pronunciation habit of parts of northern India and drop the last sound. This festival marks the sun going into the zodiacal sign of Makara, and the days growing noticeably longer. Even though the winter solstice happened a couple of weeks earlier, it's really by this time where the lengthening of the days gets noticed. Surya, the sun, is venerated with offerings. People dip in the Ganga and other rivers, depending on where they live. Food, money, and clothes are given to the poor. Families eat together and people give sweets to their neighbors and relatives. In rural areas, children go door to door singing folk songs and asking for treats. Grand fairs are held with dances, bonfires, feasts, and kite-flying competitions. The latter is particularly famous in Gujarat. At the same time, Pongal is celebrated in southern India. Also called Thai Pongal, this festival expresses gratitude for the sun and for the rain. Women cook a rice dish called Pongal. The cooking itself is a sacred ceremony done outdoors in direct sunlight in a certain type of pot. It is offered to the sun deity on the second day of the festival and then eaten as prasad in a communal feast. In 2025, these took place on January 14th by the Western calendar. Vasant Panchami. This festival marks the arrival of spring, at least on the plains of India. In the Himalayas, winter remains in full force. In 2025, this festival took place on February 2nd. Traditionally, a feast is held in the morning. Sarasvati is revered through arts, music, writing, and more kite flying, as well as special pujas in homes and temples. In mustard farming areas, this festival celebrates the crop's yellow flowers blooming, a color thought pleasing to Sarasvati, and people dress in yellow clothing and share yellow-colored foods. In temples and schools, icons of Sarasvati are dressed in yellow and venerated. Many schools arrange special puja in the morning to seek the blessing of Sarasvati. Traditionally, when children are first taught to write or study music, instruction begins on this day. A few weeks later, in 2025 on February 26, the 14th day of the lunar month of Phalguna, Mahashivaratri is celebrated, Shiva's great night. This honors his great cosmic dance of creation, preservation, and dissolution, the Ananda Tandava. According to Hindu thought, time is not linear but cyclical in nature. As such, the universe is in constant flux, going through a continuous process of being created, maintained, and destroyed. The universal process, thus, is thought of as a dance. At the time of cosmic annihilation, Shiva, who's known as Nataraja, or the Lord of the Dance, performs a cosmic dance of transformation. Though this activity is described as wild and overwhelming, it should not be viewed as one of mundane passion or anger. Mahashivaratri is a time not only to commemorate Shiva's cosmic dance, but also to meditate on how, in order to create anything new, one must first let go of the old. Another festival marking the new beginnings is spring. taking place in the full moon day of the lunar month of Phalguna, is Holi. This is one of the most widely celebrated festivals among Hindus, and has even crossed over into the secularized celebrations like color runs in the West, something which often gets a bit of slant eye by Hindus in the diaspora, depending on the degree of delinking from tradition that goes on. Something which often gets a bit of side eye by Hindus in the diaspora, depending on the degree to which delinking from tradition has occurred. Holi is a celebration of fertility, the end of winter and coming of spring, and ultimately the triumph of hope over despair. It's an overwhelmingly happy celebration, full of partying, where social distinctions like wealth, sex, age, and class fall away. People throw colored powders and water at one another. Bhang, a traditional drink made with cannabis, is consumed. Of all the Hindu festivals in the diaspora, even though the accurate date of Holi is recognized, depending on geographical location, the throwing colors portion of the festivities may get pushed off some days until the weather is warmer. For example, in 2025, Holi takes place on March 14th, which in much of the United States can still be pretty cold, and some places snow-covered, so communities may postpone festivities a bit. In the spring months, in the Northern Hemisphere, there are Hindu festivals, including some that are important to specific parts of the Hindu traditions, but let's jump forward a bit in the calendar to summer. Taking place on July 10th in 2025, the holiday of Guru Purnima is a day that Hindus, Jains, and Buddhists honor their teachers, their gurus. This can be both spiritual teachers and more general academic teachers. It takes place on the day traditionally held to be the birthday of Ved Vyasa, the person who is believed to have compiled the Vedas, composed the epic poem the Mahabharata, as well as of the Puranas, all important sources of Hindu knowledge. For persons living monastic lives, it is an important day to gather and visit their guru, honor them with special ceremonies, and rededicate themselves towards following this teacher's guidance for the coming year. For those people living ordinary non-monastic lives, particularly students of classical music and dance, is an important day to honor their teachers. Taking place on the last day of the lunar month of Shravana, August 9th in 2025, Raksha Bandhan, literally the bond of protection, celebrates sibling love, especially between brothers and sisters, but also figuratively, the spirit of brotherhood, sisterhood, and camaraderie in general. Siblings tie a colorful string bracelet, the Rakhi, on each other's wrists as a symbol of love and affection, along with a spiritual chant. Traditionally, it's mostly women who tie the string on men, and this means the man has a duty to protect that woman for as long as the string lasts. It's traditionally never taken off until it breaks on its own, which theoretically should take about a year until the next Raksha Bandhan. Likewise, priests tie strings on the wrists of those who come to their temples, symbolizing the duty of the temple goers to support the temple that they enjoy visiting. Traditionally, women tied Rakhis on the wrists of the king, symbolizing his duty to protect all the women in his realm. Now this is often done with the Prime Minister of India or with heads of state. Slightly after Raksha Bandhan, the birthday of Lord Krishna is marked. This is the holiday of Krishna Janmashtami, this year taking place on August 16th. This is a joyous festival celebrating the birth of Lord Krishna, with much group singing of holy songs called bhajans, and merriment, dances, and plays of Krishna's childhood. There are often competitions, such as trying to break a pot of yogurt hanging high in the air by forming human pyramids, standing on each other's shoulders to reach the pot and spill the yogurt, which is then formally offered as holy prasad. Sri Krishna was born at midnight, and so the peak ceremony of Janmashtami is at midnight. But the whole day, starting before sunrise, is filled with celebrations of Sri Krishna, leading up to the climactic moment. Most Hindu temples, especially Krishna or Vaishnav temples, are beautifully decorated and lit on this day and night, as are the homes of Krishna devotees. Temples especially are filled with beautiful flowers. At large Vaishnav temples specifically, festivities often begin before dawn and continue all day until past midnight, and temples are often festooned with enormous strung flower garlands. Some devotees like to go and volunteer to decorate their local temple. Children are encouraged to help make garlands, hang leaves, and other decorations, and generally make the setting, home or temple, beautiful and festive. Falling between August 22nd and September 20th by the Western calendar, Ganesh Chaturthi is one of the most popular festivals in the year in many communities, celebrating the birthday of Lord Ganesh, the much beloved remover of obstacles. During the festivities, a temporary icon of Ganesh is fashioned, veneration offered, and the icon immersed in a nearby body of water, dissolving it. In some cities, particularly Mumbai, Huge festival icons are made each year and paraded through the streets. The massive popularity of Ganesh Chaturthi is a comparatively new thing, even if well established today, considering the truly ancient origins of some of the other festivals, that is, with the popularity really taking off in the late 19th century when the festival was promoted as a way of uniting Hindus and protesting British rule. Some weeks after Ganesh Chaturthi, the 9-day festival of Devi Navaratri takes place, a more than week-long honoring of the feminine aspect of the divine. A similar festival takes place earlier in the year, but this is the much larger of the two. The festival takes place over 9 nights, as it parallels the 9-night battle between Durga and the forces of oppression and ignorance. 9 forms of the divine feminine are honored, a different one each day. It is very common for temples to give out free food, though some people fast to some degree over the holiday, or only eat fruit once a day. Later, as the days get shorter in the Northern Hemisphere, the most major and popular holidays for Hindus across India takes place. The Buddhist, Jain, and Sikh communities also have holidays around this time, with different symbolism. This is Diwali. Diwali takes place for several days during the month of Kartik, between mid-October and mid-November. Often called the Festival of Lights, as the full name Deepavali points to, the full festival extends over 5 days and celebrates the victory of good over evil, light over darkness, knowledge over ignorance, and a good year of harvesting. Common celebrations involve giving and receiving gifts, fireworks, lights, delicious traditional feasts and banquets, and gambling. For many communities, Diwali primarily honors the deity of wealth, Lakshmi. In the evening, most Hindu buildings, homes, temple shops, etc. are adorned in every nook and cranny with many glimmering oil lamps. The lamps are invitations to Lakshmi to enter the building and bring prosperity and blessings. Hindus further invite her by opening the windows and doors of their homes and drawing attractive images, like lotus flowers and colorful rangoli patterns on the floor. Though there are other smaller holidays, festivals, and days of spiritual importance from the end of Diwali to the end of the year according to the Western calendar, Diwali concludes the large festivals of the year. Before we close out this episode, I'd be remiss in not mentioning the largest religious gathering of humans on Earth, the Kumbh Mela. Taking place on a multi-year cycle, rotating through 4 sacred places in India, the Kumbh Mela gets its name from the vessel of immortality mentioned in a cosmic creation story. In this, during the churning of the cosmic sea, 14 major elements were produced. One of them was the nectar of immortality, and the positive and negative energies of the multiverse engaged in, essentially, a tug-of-war to capture it all. A few drops spilled, and every 4 years, a 55-day-long festival occurs on the banks of the rivers where a drop fell: Prayagraj, Haridwar, Ujjain, and Nasik. By bathing there, Hindus recall this story and renew their efforts towards liberation, an action which begins the process of removing the scars and burdens of the actions and events of the past. Once every 12 years, the festival is particularly large, a huge affair in which millions of Hindu pilgrims go to bathe in the river Ganga. This year's Mahakumbh Mela in Prayagraj is expected to draw 400 million people. You've made it to the end of this episode of All About Hinduism. Before you go, do me a favor. Leave us a nice 5-star review on whatever platform you're listening to this on. Please also subscribe or follow us so you can get all the new episodes the moment they're released. And if you found this episode informative, enjoyable, and useful, please share it right now with someone who will feel the same about it. Finally, you can help ensure that more of these get made by making a donation to HAF at hinduamerican.org/donate. Thanks again for listening.